and welcome to my channel, Haylee Marie Vintage. Today we are doing another travel vlog. This is for Montevideo in Uruguay. So we're just gonna go ahead and jump straight into the footage. Alright, we are beginning our video where the other one ended, which is on the ferry from Buenos Aires to Montevideo. We have gotten close to Montevideo. The sun is setting. I did not super account for the fact it would be dark when we first reached Montevideo, but I figured we would figure it out and it would be fine. So we got settled in our hotel and it is now the next morning. Our hotel has breakfast included, so we ate breakfast there, and now we are doing our usual park wandering. This is the first park, which again you see a lot of trees. That's also something we noticed, is there are just so many beautiful trees in these cities that are tall and big, and it was just enjoyable. Also, again, the architecture is beautiful here in Montevideo, which shouldn't surprise me since we had already had quite the eye feast in Buenos Aires, but it's always cool to see more beautiful architecture. And from there we kind of wandered down the main street, coming across some of their big things, one of which is this fountain lock piece thing that they have here. And again, you can see some really varied architecture in the background. I know I've said it before, I'll say it again, but I could not get over the architecture in all these places. And we've arrived at another park. This one has some gorgeous fountains, as well as really, really pretty statues, as well as some more wisteria, which we know what a fan I am of wisteria. I can't help it. I'm going to show you every bit of wisteria I see in the entire world. This cool castle building thing is like their big city fire department, which I thought was really cool. And I also liked this weird blue building across from it, even though it kind of looks like a strip mall building. This building was so funky. I loved how tall and thin and weird it was. That little, like, if I could have an apartment that was one of those little turrets, I would be so excited. And then we came kind of to like a main museum, I believe embassy fountain area thing. Our main goal for walking where we walked was to get to the soccer stadium, which is back there. This was for my friend, obviously not me. We then caught an Uber back to our area. It's always fun to just drive through a city and see a bunch of things. Like, nothing here is technically that exciting. There's not even any architecture that's particularly cool, but I will always enjoy just driving across cities and getting to see things. And we stopped and got a meal at a cafe that included a big berry juice thing. We then popped back to the hotel, which I'm now giving you the tour because I couldn't before because I was tired. So here is the lovely view, which is straight into another window. So we kept that closed. The room again was quite huge. However, this was like a terrible bathroom. I did not enjoy this bathroom. It looks nice because it's big. However, I don't like this European shower partition thing. I think it's annoying. However, I will say the true view from this hotel window was the bathroom. Look at how pretty that is. I was not just leaving this open. Also, before we end the hotel room tour, these are some bags from some fabric shops I went to. I'll show you these in a haul video later. Teehee. The actual cool part of the hotel was like the lobby and everything else. This was a refurbished 1920s building, and it still had a lot of the original work, which I thought was really cool and why I booked the place. The rooms weren't great, but the hotel was really quite cool. It had this nice space in the lobby that you could like sit down for a while and work in if you needed to. And then I liked like these bookshelves, and the lobby was quite spectacular. I mean, you see all these different details, and it was really, really quite a cool lobby. However, yeah, the rooms were kind of meh. We then ate at another cafe. We have more juice and more croissants. I know, shocking, but I loved the pink and white and black color scheme of this establishment, and the plants were of course really beautiful, and it just overall was very aesthetic. We then wandered around, and I thought this space was cool, so now you have to look at it. I just thought it had a lot of cool details, including this little alligator guy. While wandering, we found ourselves in this giant square. I can't find the name of the square on the map. It just names all the buildings and monuments around it. Like, there's the monument of this guy on a horse, which I don't find monuments of guys on horses that exciting, so I'm not going to bother to name it. However, I did find this building quite exciting. So for me, this is going to be the square of Palacio Salvo, which is just a historic building, and a really cool one at that. And from here we wandered through what is like an original city wall piece and went into what is considered the Old Town. This city was so lively, and a lot of like just pedestrian areas, which we love. Like this whole area was just pedestrians. And it was just fun to enjoy walking around. This was definitely like people heading home after work. It was kind of fun to have the palm trees with this, again, French style architecture. And then of course we came across yet another park with a ton more benches to sit in, and we sat in this park for quite a bit. And we just enjoyed the evening light. It's hard to not love just sitting and enjoying a place like this. And it is the next day. So today our goal is to basically walk as far down this road right off the water as we can. It has a beautiful sidewalk, lots of places to sit. So we have plenty of time to let it take how long it's going to take. We got to pass all these weird buildings. Like I don't have any idea what this is, but it's interesting. And just enjoy the water and the breeze. I'm not even sure how many miles we walked of this, but we walked quite a bit. This area here we've walked to is the Pista de Patinaje de Parque Rodó. And again, excuse my Spanish accent, it is not good. But I just thought this area was really quite beautiful with a little like park that jet out into the water, breezy, and the beautiful building here in the background. And it was just really beautiful to kind of see these dunes with the city behind it. And then over here, of course, because it's South America, we have some beautiful street art. And we sat in this location for a while, which was near the Holocaust Memorial. That's what this wall behind us is. And it was just a really peaceful and nice place to sit that felt very slow and out of the hustle and bustle of everything. And we just kept walking. Walking places like this in good company with a friend who, like, I really enjoy intellectually is always a good time. I mean, I will say anyone who I'm traveling with who is also intellectual is also probably mildly as depressing as I am. So I can't remember what we talked about here, but I remember both of us got riled and depressed. So, you know, it was a good conversation. But I loved the landscape here. This was just unique and something I hadn't really experienced before. I felt like the green with the grass and like the sandiness of the color of the rocks was just really beautiful. And here we are, having finally reached, I guess, our goal for the day, which was to get out just past the Punta Brava, where you can see kind of like the fancy, ritzy beach area of Montevideo. It was interesting to see all these big buildings, and there was definitely a lot more litter on this side than on the other side we were on. We also, I guess, kind of sat by a dead bird, so that was our bad. After that, we ate a beautiful Italian meal, and then we took an Uber back to the hotel, and we wandered Old Town again. This is Scotiabank, but more important is the architecture. Obviously, we are not sponsored here by any bank, but yeah, the architecture on this building is just spectacular. In the Old Town, there were so many people and like booths and music that we kind of figured something was going on. There were lines out the door for every museum. It was pretty wild, but it was also really enjoyable, especially when I can sit and pause in a place like this that's a little bit less crowded. I love being in a crowded area for a second. And again, we have some stunning architecture near some really interesting street art, which again, I just always love. And I've really enjoyed that part of both Uruguay and Buenos Aires. So here we are in the Toy Museum, which this is so cool. I highly recommend it, especially if you have multiple generations to go to this with. I think it would be really interesting because there was stuff that I remembered, and I think it would be interesting to see like what my parents or anybody I had that was like grandparent age in my life remembered. Here, of course, we are in the little toy sewing machine display. So basically this museum collects toys from all over the world and curates them into little displays, and it was super fun and interesting. You're not gonna like learn a ton in a museum like this, but it just is an interesting museum, and I love looking at artifacts like toys because culturally they're so like omnipresent. Like every culture has its toys, and so it was just kind of interesting to see a bunch of variations of toys. I also loved these little miniature kitchen sets. I thought these were so fun. And they also had all these Barbie like relics, which was really funny. It's just always interesting to see like what a place like this chooses to keep and put on display. I loved the Barbie Ferrari. I thought the Barbie shower thing was really quite funny. And then they also had a lot of cool, I believe over here was like section of local toys, and I liked seeing what they made as opposed to like what is obviously like mass produced. I specifically always enjoy a boat section or like the little wheelbarrows. And I loved seeing these toys. Like these dogs, you can tell they can wag their tails kind of. I mean, it's wagging their whole butt. But I had a dog toy like that growing up that I adored. This was just like quite a delightful trip down memory lane, I feel like. So I highly recommend checking out this museum. It was not that expensive for how good of a time we had. And then we again stopped for dinner at the same cafe we had gone the night before because almost nothing was open because we didn't know it at the time. It was a like public holiday weekend. So we are the next morning. This is the view off of our hotel's rooftop. This was just enjoyable. The breakfast is up on this level, so you could go sit out on the rooftop if you desired. And the views were really quite cool. This hotel was maybe like not my favorite, but honestly the location was amazing. So I would recommend it purely for that, and the service and everything was good. It was just the rooms that were a little iffy. After we enjoyed our peaceful rooftop breakfast, we descended into the crowds of the Feria de Tristan, Narvaja, which is a big Sunday flea market they have. As you can see, there's all types of things here. We got here as early in the morning as possible in hopes that it would be a little bit less crowded because both of us are neurodivergent and crowds really overwhelm us, so we were trying to avoid the worst of that. Most of this market is like a lot of kind of interesting imported goods. I did get some mate straws here. I thought they had them for good prices, as well as some locally made pottery, which again I'll show those in my haul video. Overall, I did a terrible job filming this, apologies, but it was really interesting, I swear. There were also a lot of like imported things from America that were like drugstore products that it looks like someone just like brought a whole bunch back in their suitcase, and I always find that really interesting. If you're looking for books, this market is fantastic. There is a whole little like book section. Most of the books were in Spanish, so I did not particularly look, although this would probably be a good way for me to start learning Spanish a little bit more seriously. And then we were treated to a quiet cafe where we ate a lot of salmon again. So here we are in the Romantic Museum, which is essentially just a house museum full of beautiful decorations. So we were able to get into all these museums and historic houses for free this day because I can't find the exact name of the holiday, but it was essentially a weekend for celebrating Uruguay's heritage, so all the museums were free to the public, which is why we saw all those lines going to those museums the other day, as well as why all the museums are very crowded. The downtown is crowded and there's tons of music and festivities going on. Also, here's my response for anyone who claims fat people didn't exist back then. Go away. This room was really cool. It had a bunch of fans, which I love, decorative fans, and some of these were pretty incredible. They're really hard to show you because of the glare of the glass, but they're like inlaid and carved and really quite stunning pieces of art. I loved this weird mermaid mirror piece. I thought it was so fun. What a fun vanity that would make. And I couldn't find any info on this artist, but I really loved, there were two pieces here by this artist, this piece here, and then a boring piece, and then another piece, and I just really liked the way this artist captured women. It felt a lot more joyful and authentic than most of the other pieces in this house. And here we have a very ornate bed. It's interesting because the bed reminds me of Mexico, like that's a lot of Mexico's symbol, but I also really thought this painting was quite beautiful. And then of course the courtyard of houses like this is always enjoyable. I loved the pink with the tiles. It just was a very, very beautiful house. And then the next museum we went to is the Art Museum of Pre-Columbian and Indigenous Art. I always find going to these more interesting than going to, they have a bunch of museums here that have like imported stuff from Europe, but one of the reasons I go here is to learn more about the culture and the peoples who come from here. And again, I do want to point out the architecture in this is quite fantastic. I love this glass dome courtyard. It is absolutely stunning. They also had some pieces here by modern indigenous artists. This piece is not transforming well on film, but it was quite moving. There was something about this piece that just really made me feel very strongly, and I always appreciate that in a piece. There were also these really interesting pieces that were kind of about weaving and in the indigenous arts around weaving. I always really appreciate when a museum like this also has modern indigenous art in it. Again, sorry for the glare. I always am absolutely entranced by indigenous pottery. I mean, pottery in general, but especially when it's so old and you know that these were the people innovating. Next, we moved to the Carnival Museum, which I was quite excited about. Again, crowded because it was a free day. We did have to wait a little bit to get in, but they had a person out performing with drums and getting kids involved, and it was quite actually an enjoyable time to wait, and they were getting the audience to like clap, and it was really quite fun. It was also very fun to see all the different costumes here. I will say all of these were crowded enough that I don't feel like I got to read the full context about what these were about, which is too bad. I actually would have probably preferred to have paid to go see these museums and seen them on a quieter day. We were here for most of this holiday, so it was what it was, and I am very glad they opened their museums for free some days for their citizens. So I will live without the context. And here we're in another historic home. This one, there wasn't much to see inside. You weren't really allowed in most of it. So there's not a ton to remark upon other than I did find this courtyard quite beautiful. The whole time we were here, this museum had an absolutely bonkers line, but this is the Museum of Decorative Arts. I would have really liked to see inside of it with how beautiful the outside is, but it just wasn't in the cards for us. So hopefully you enjoy the outside of this building. From here, we just wandered around until we got so hungry that we got really cranky from staring, I guess, at architecture. We just kept wanting to walk and just feel the city, feel alive, and look at all the different things that are beautiful here. So we did that, yes, until we made ourselves incredibly cranky people. We ordered, I can't remember what this is, might be Peruvian food from a food truck, and sat in the square and enjoyed it. After feeling absolutely exhausted, we went back to the hotel. We got quite burnt out the prior day in Montevideo, so we decided to keep it really chill this day. Both of us were also feeling some different types of chronic pain, so we wanted to spend a lot of our last day in bed, gearing up for the next part of our leg of our journey back to Buenos Aires. So we decided to spend some time in the Montevideo Botanical Gardens. These again were free. And I would also say we're not particularly well kept, but I would say we're more well kept than the ones in Buenos Aires. They did have a bunch of wisteria, which, again, I will always show you. Very exciting for me. They also had some interesting art and ponds here in this area. I'm sure in like the prime of the season, these ponds are incredibly gorgeous. And I thought this like nice little mosaic drawn piece was really quite beautiful. Very, very, I believe, Art Nouveau. This patch of flowers was my favorite because it had the most color. We know I am a sucker for color, so here we are, and here I am staring at the color. I'm not quite sure what all these flowers are. I know some are geraniums and some are daisies, but these ones here in the middle, I'm not quite sure what variety they are, but I really enjoyed looking at them. And then bear with me for a second. Yes, I know you were just watching ants, but we sat in this park, and where we sat was along an ant path, and we just enjoyed watching them like work and all the carrying things and kind of seeing how it seemed like the worker dynamics were going on. I know this sounds very boring, but it's little things like this that are highlights in my travel. Also, since childhood, I have had a very, very special love of ants. I can't describe it. It doesn't make any sense, but I used to spend hours in the backyard making like these really intense enclosures for them to crawl around in, and I would just watch them carry things. And yeah, so ants are like strangely special to me, so this was a strangely special to me moment that I want to remember. When we continued our walk around, this grove of trees was particularly interesting. I have never seen root formations that look like this before, so we just kind of stared at them in awe for a little bit. I still need to read up more about why these roots are the way they are. And then we did find one of their classical fountains. Again, quite beautiful. I will be a sucker for a fountain. I hope one day to own a space that I can have a ridiculous fountain in that, honestly, knowing myself, I will probably carve myself because that's who I am. And again, we took an Uber back to our area. The Botanical Gardens is in a really, really, really wealthy part of town, so I thought it would be fun to kind of show you the drive by these really expensive houses. There was some really beautiful architecture in here that I feel like I am nowhere near justifying how beautiful and like what a big variety it is in this area. But I'm almost glad we did the Botanical Gardens just to see kind of this area, because we would have never ended up in this area otherwise. And after eating dinner in a cafe, we took our final sunset walk around Montevideo. We have to get early early up in the morning to leave. So we just enjoyed all the sights of the things we had seen before in really beautiful golden light. It's just enjoyable sometimes to spend some time in a place where you don't have that much to do and you can just wander around and see familiar sights over and over and over again. And now we're to the next day. So this was the smallest hiccup of our trip. This was the only hiccup, I would argue, which means we did pretty darn well. But here we are on a bus to Colonia del Sacramento. Yes, you heard that right. We are taking a bus to the city we've already been through and then taking the ferry from that because they were doing some repairs on the ferries that go straight from Montevideo to Buenos Aires. So instead, we had to tack on a 3-hour bus ride from 6 a.m. in the morning to Colonia, and then we would have to take the ferry across. So this added a lot of time to our travel day. We were not particularly pleased. However, it's okay. Travel doesn't always go as planned, and honestly, for this to be the only thing that didn't go as planned, we did pretty okay. We tried to look on the bright side and just enjoy going through the city at sunrise and seeing again the city in a whole new light, as well as getting to drive through a bunch of the countryside. So it wasn't that bad. It just was not what we planned. But with that, we are going to hop to the very end of this video, which will be the wrap up where I just give you my final thoughts about Montevideo. All right, now that we have gone through the footage, I just want to share kind of some of my final thoughts about Montevideo. So we did 4 full-time days, like full days in Montevideo, and then the 2 days traveling. I think we could have spent 1, maybe even 2 days less in Montevideo. It was a really beautiful city. It was definitely worth going around and looking at things, but definitely not that I regret going to Montevideo. It was still really beautiful. It was so fun to see another country and a slightly different culture. However, I feel like we just didn't have enough time in Buenos Aires, even though we did, of course, go back, which will be the 3rd part of this vlog. Montevideo is just like slower living, and I think if you're like a beach person, it's a great place to go. I'm not really a slow living or beach person. I like a really hustle bustle city, and this was definitely quieter than that, so I don't know that it was the right fit for me. It's not that I don't think it's worth visiting. It's not that I didn't enjoy my time there. It's just I like a little bit more hectic in my travels, I guess, in my cities. I am not a relaxer, and also, which we definitely got the feeling being there, it doesn't seem like they get a ton of American tourists there, and it's really more geared for Brazilian or actually Argentine tourists. So you could definitely like tell that there. So as a result, like even just looking at, there weren't that many interesting tours for me to go on and things like that. So I just definitely think, while it was worth seeing, I think we could have done 2 full days there and then like the half days. The only other thing I want to note is the ferries. So it is really, really easy, don't get me wrong, to go from ferry to ferry because of how long customs takes and how just exhausting waiting in those lines are. And since you're a ferry, you all get there at once and you all bunch up and it takes a while. I definitely think what we should have done is we should have done Colonia from Montevideo instead of Buenos Aires. Well, it was a 2-hour bus ride instead of a 1-hour ferry ride. How long customs and stuff took? That ferry ride was probably 2 hours. For Colonia, and obviously wouldn't have to do that if we left from Montevideo. So maybe we should have done 3 days in Montevideo and one of those days a bus over to Colonia. So that's just kind of my thoughts. Otherwise, the cafes were beautiful. The food was great. Museums were great. I have no complaints pretty much. Yeah, I was trying to think. People were really, really, really welcoming, and that's always really nice. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I would note here. I don't think so. Yeah, I will say the ferry days felt really long, and I think that's probably just like also a timing of terminals and things. So hopefully you enjoyed this vlog. Hopefully it gave you some information about traveling to Montevideo. I hope you will catch me for the Argentina part 2, where we stay in San Telmo, as well as a haul of all the vintage and sewing goodies I brought back. So with that, I will see you in the next week. Bye!